Welcome on back, folks, to the second annual Oppression Olympics, a competition where Republicans across the United States are fighting to see who can be the most intolerant. Republicans already have introduced 325 anti-LGBTQ bills, with around 130 of them targeting trans rights specifically. Look at those old, balding men go. Hello everybody, my name is AppsNatlis, and welcome on back to another video. Now, in all seriousness, the tornado of anti-LGBTQ bills being proposed in the United States is incredibly concerning. While a good majority of these bills never make it into law, the ones that do are incredibly destructive and harmful. Let's take a look at the types of bills these legislators are trying to pass. But before we do, hey, consider subscribing and leaving a like on this video. You know you'll want to. I will also link to several charities working to undo this sort of legislation in the description below. I think the most destructive and cruel of the bills being proposed are the ones restricting access to gender-affirming healthcare for trans children. There are two types of bills like this being introduced. Some bills are trying to cut off trans children's access from gender-affirming care altogether. This kind of medical care is stuff ranging from hormone therapy to puberty blockers. Now, the arguments for this type of legislation are the easiest to debunk. The rate of suicide among transgender children is incredibly high. It is widely known across the medical community that the rate of suicide among transgender children is significantly reduced when they can receive access to gender-affirming care. According to research from the American Medical Association, gender-affirming care for minors, including hormone therapy and puberty blockers, led to 73% lower odds of suicidality after a 12-month follow-up. It also significantly improves mental health among these children. Now, I will also mention that while it is very uncommon for trans people to detransition, in the case they might want to do so, hormone replacement therapy and puberty blockers are entirely reversible. And for these reasons, just about every reputable medical organization in the United States recommends gender-affirming care for minors experiencing gender dysphoria, aka transgender children, and have condemned bills trying to restrict it. I'll name a few of those organizations for you, though, in case you have any doubts. The American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Pediatric Endocrine Society, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Now, luckily, the few bills banning hormone therapy and puberty blockers that made it into law were quickly overturned by the courts. The only exception being the bill in Alabama that just passed, but that is expected to be overturned soon. Then you have the bills banning gender-affirming surgery for minors. The main difference between these bills and the other bills are that the other bills ban gender-affirming care that was reversible, whereas gender-affirming surgeries are irreversible. Now, typically the argument for these bills is centered on that difference, arguing that minors should not be making irreversible medical decisions like that. They don't want kids who might be quote-unquote confused to make decisions like that. And on the surface, that seems like a reasonable argument. But that's not exactly how it works. You see, it's not as simple as a kid deciding instantaneously to have irreversible surgery on them. In my experience, I am currently navigating the process of obtaining hormone replacement therapy, and there are a lot of requirements for me to get that as a minor. I will be turning 18 soon, but I'll be starting hormone therapy before then. But for hormone therapy, here are the requirements I had to meet. I had to get approval from both parents, required amount of time of counseling with a gender therapist, a letter of approval from that gender therapist, and also blood work. And that's just for hormone therapy, which is entirely reversible. So you can imagine there are a lot of restrictions already on accessing gender-affirming surgery. And the medical organizations I listed before have also approved of gender-affirming surgery for minors in special circumstances. And if you asked any of the people writing up this legislation, no, they probably would not have known any of these facts. Most of them have tuned out the experts and have tuned out logic and reasoning. In reality, most of this legislation is drafted in order to gain political brownie points in the ongoing culture war. It is meant to rally radicals who are so terrified of trans people just existing. You know, the ones who tune in to Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity every night. Now, the next category of anti-LGBTQ legislation is restrictions on the ability of trans people to socially transition, aka bathroom bills and sports bills. Let's discuss the bathrooms first. The reasoning behind bathroom bills is a lot easier to debunk in my opinion. So there are essentially two arguments for the bathroom bills. The first argument is blatant transphobia. They argue that trans women are not real women, and therefore should not be able to use the women's restroom. They try to justify this using the Bible and quote-unquote biology. Well, given that the United States is a secular nation where the church and government are separate, ultimately any use of the Bible to justify this legislation is unconstitutional. Then you have biology. People say that by the definition of women, trans women are not women. And by saying that trans women are women, you take away all meaning from the definition of woman. But there are several problems from this line of thinking. First of all, it is widely documented that there are differences between sex and gender. Sex refers to someone's genitalia, whereas gender refers to the social role. And while I don't think there really ought to be any gatekeeping around anyone, whether or not people are classified as a woman or not, you could say that the female gender is associated with feminine traits and behaviors, such as wearing feminine clothing, using makeup, etc. So sex, in that regard, should only matter between someone and their doctor, or someone and their spouse if they decide on becoming pregnant or not. Whereas gender is affiliated with traits such as the bathroom you use, the pronouns you use, what you wear. Now, granted, that doesn't mean all people who are female do all these things, but you can see how much more impactful gender is versus sex. So when trans women use the women's restroom, a cisgender woman isn't going to notice any differences in her experience. She'll still be surrounded by women. The only difference is that some of these women might have different genitalia than she does. But why does that matter at all? It's not like you're going into the restroom and you're looking at people's genitalia. Unless you're some kind of fucking freak. And yes, you might be able to tell that some of these women are trans. Not every trans woman is going to be able to pass all the time. But once again, why does that matter? Not every woman is the same. There are tall women and short women. There are blonde women and brunette women, just like there are cis women and trans women. So really, the question is, are you willing to tolerate people who are different? Are you willing to be accepting of other people for who they really are? Or will you cling to your bigotry? Now, the second argument behind bathroom bills is that it will lead to trans women going into the women's bathroom to rape cis women. Except that's a misleading argument in and of itself. Those aren't trans women doing that. Those are men pretending to be trans women. But even still, the argument is lopsided, because this is a person that does not exist. This is a hypothetical person. No one in actuality does this. There are a few cases where this has happened, but it is so unbelievably rare. That's why every time it happens, it's national news. Because it happens so little, people make a big deal out of it. And even in the very, 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 very rare circumstance when this happens, then what you have to do is you punish the bad actor, they go to jail, and everything is fine. And so this legislation is like if a plane crash happened and in response the entire world banned airplane travel. You know, people are so afraid of dying in a plane crash. But the reality is an airplane is so much safer than riding a car. It's a classic example of fear clouding your judgment. And I can guarantee you that the number of trans women who didn't commit suicide because they are accepted by society is exponentially higher than the number of women put in actual danger as a result of trans people using the bathroom. So when we look at the evidence, there is zero good reason to ban trans people from using the correct restroom. Now that we've taken a look at the bathroom bills, let's take a look at those sports bills. These are bills banning trans women from competing with cis women in sports. And to the untrained eye, this might seem like a very reasonable thing to do. If we let people who are born as males compete with females, it would be unfair. If we let men compete with women, men would dominate. But there are yet again problems with this line of thinking. First of all, you are comparing cis women with cis men, not comparing cis women with trans women. And this is why the argument is rooted in hidden transphobia. By making arguments like this, you are essentially declaring there are absolutely zero differences between trans women and cis men. Now, we talked about hormone therapy earlier. Hormone therapy for trans women drastically lowers the level of testosterone they have and produce. This leads to things like less hair growth, boobs, a curvier ass, and also a loss in strength. This makes the strength of cis men and trans women drastically different. Secondly, this argument is partially misogynistic. It assumes that someone who is of the male sex will automatically perform better in sports, which isn't true. There's a lot of skill required in sports, so it's not like someone of the male sex can compete on a women's league and shatter every record. Thirdly, biological advantages define sports on every level. Things like height, genetics, weight, etc. are advantages that athletes have over each other. And yes, some trans women may have some slight advantages over cis women. But biological advantages are present in every sport. There are even cis women who have to take hormones in order to compete because their testosterone levels are so high. So it should be the exact same sort of thing here. But anyways, banning trans women from sports is like the under 6 foot league in basketball. A league where they only allow people under 6 foot to play. And finally, one point to mention, people have suggested trans-only leagues in sports. But once again, I think that is, flat out transphobic because being trans is just like any other biological advantage. But also, it's completely impractical. The governor of Utah recently vetoed a bill banning trans women from high school sports, citing that there was literally only one person who would be impacted by the law. So there would be far too little people for a trans-only league to form. And it is, once again, just like any other biological advantage in sports. I'm not even going to go into how incredibly important sports are to some trans people, and how sports has saved many people from suicide. Because I know that these legislatures probably do not give a shit. But yeah, it's really cruel and inhumane to take sports from trans people. I don't think these legislators look at trans people like real people, just as political scapegoats. And I think it's really sad that a lot of people on the left avoid this argument because they think it's impossible to win. I do appreciate people like Hasanabi though, because people like him demonstrate that this argument over trans sports can be won. But yeah, these sports bills have no good reason to exist, and I would even go as far as to classify them as unconstitutional. I also did not cover Greg Abbott's order to the Texan Attorney General to prosecute the parents of transgender children, in which he classified hormone therapy as child abuse. However, I think I've established that hormone therapy for minors is anything but child abuse. I think it's a really terrifying order, to be honest with you. And it honestly reminds me of the Gestapo ripping Jewish people from their homes, just outright making their existence illegal. And I don't think the situation in Texas is at that level, obviously. I don't know if it will ever reach that level, but the similarities there are quite terrifying. Since that order was A, blocked by a court order, and B, is just a more radical form of previously discussed legislation, I don't think there's anything else to debunk. And now we arrive at the face of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. Don't say gay. Oops, I said it! But yeah, the Don't Say Gay bill was a bill proposed in Florida, which, of course it was, banning the discussion of sexuality and gender identity in the classroom. You've probably heard of it, as it's gotten a lot of media attention, which makes sense considering queer people have been more accepted by society in general, versus trans people, that is. That doesn't make the bill any less important, though. This bill is actually incredibly ridiculous for a lot of reasons. First of all, the bill was written so shittily that it could be interpreted to mean a ban on talking about straight people and cisgender people. Maybe even a ban on all pronouns too. Why not? And so I think that goes to show that A, this bill was written so sloppily because legislatures do not care about the issue and they just want political points, or B, written by people who have no clue how the fucking education system works. Or both. Probably both. Republicans are intent on calling it the anti-grooming bill, but that is actually incredibly easy to debunk and absolutely ridiculous. I don't think they understand what the word grooming means. The definition of grooming is essentially the act of preparing a child, to be sexually assaulted. Stuff like meeting up with 14-year-olds you met online, or kidnapping children in a white van. That kind of shit. But I do think I know what they are trying to say, though, although my Republican is a little bit rusty, so please excuse any errors in translation. They're essentially insinuating, by allowing the discussion of LGBTQ people in classrooms, teachers are trying to turn them gay, so that they can assault them. I believe that is what they are trying to say. And this argument is utterly bullshit. You cannot turn people gay. This is a common misconception conservatives have believed for decades. That's why they've tried conversion therapy for so long. They believe that being gay is a choice, and that with enough prayer or enough torture, you can make them straight. But the only instance in which conversion therapy has ever worked is when they torture children to the point that they no longer admit they are gay out of fear. Fear of being tortured further, abandoned, or killed. Conversion therapy is also used on trans people, by the way, and it is just as cruel and horrifying. But no, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you cannot turn someone gay. It's not a choice. People are born this way. What you can do, however, is help people understand that it is okay to be gay. We live in a society that, in some aspects, frowns on gay people. Some parents turn on Tucker Carlson at night and raise their child while listening to this propaganda. And as their child grows up, they are being told from a very young age that being gay is wrong. Being gay is bad. Being trans is bad. And if you are gay or trans, God will hate you. And your parents will hate you too. What'd you think of my Tucker Carlson impression there? So when people inevitably realize they are gay, they repress it. They try to deny it because they are so terrified of what happens to gay people, or they're just so ashamed of who they are. So that's why it's so hard for people to come out of the closet. It's ironic how conservatives call this a bill protecting children from indoctrination, when in reality, it's allowing the right to perpetuate their own indoctrination of children. But yeah, I guess if you call indoctrination teaching children that gay people are real and that they can't change their sexuality, then yes, I guess they do want to indoctrinate your children. What the right is trying to do is maintain the status quo, to let Christian ideals govern and not actual Christian ideals, very toxic Christian ideals, not, like actual things that God taught. But yeah, they want those ideals to govern every aspect of society, even though that's unconstitutional. That is what the Founding Fathers feared. And so this bill aims to stop teachers from talking about the existence of gay people. Because that way, when their parents tell them that being gay is wrong and that being trans is wrong and that gay and trans people aren't real, they won't have any reason to believe otherwise. So that's why they freak out about gay people in books or in trans people in movies, because they are so fucking delusional that they believe gay and trans people are just constructs of the radical left's doing. And by the way, gay animals have been identified in over 1,500 species. So no, it's not just culture changing our children, it's that our children are coming to terms with reality. This bill is, in all honesty, an existential threat. If gay people or trans people can never be talked about in the classroom, then when people try to come out as gay, it's so easy to shove them back into the closet. They want to erase gay people and erase trans people from history. Now, when we talk about these types of bills who are written by, bigots who are so afraid of the truth that they would rather pretend the truth isn't real, well, it's pretty easy to get demoralized. I know this firsthand. These bills have directly affected the state of my mental health. It's hard when there are so many bills, so many attempts to erase you from history. How could we possibly win? And why does everyone hate me when I just want to live my life in peace? But let me tell you something. Love always wins. It's why we abolished slavery. Why we legalized gay marriage. Why we let trans people use the correct restroom. Because the one thing that unites us all is love. Hate is driven from fear. People are afraid of what they do not know. People are afraid of the dark. But when we turn the lights on, we realize that there's nothing to be scared of at all. That's why day after day conservatives are ceding ground in the culture war. They are losing because love is against them and love is with us. The doctrine of the left is the doctrine of love, and love always wins. Thank you all so much for watching this video. This is my first real video essay, so let me know if you want to see more stuff like this in the future. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and leaving a like. I also left some links to some fantastic charities working to fight this legislation in the description. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will talk to you all later.